3, 2, 1. Neale Donald Walsch, welcome to Nature of Reality Radio. I must say, I don't exactly remember where I heard about you, but I wouldn't have contacted you unless I felt you are a worthwhile guest and worthy of having some glorification time on my show. Before I give you the chance to tell your primary source perspective experience, I just need to give a couple quick tidbits out to my listeners. Folks, still getting kind of hard to get shows on. I've only been able to do like once a week recently, and the first interview that I've done with Yvonne Perry, that was going to be the first interview I monetize, asking people to monetize, to pay me on Patreon in order to listen to the last 40% of the interview. Still have to upload that to YouTube, and I do have to make sure I upload that before I upload this one, because I interviewed her before interviewing you. So I will make sure I get that out of the way as soon as possible. And then a couple days after that, maybe I'll upload this interview to YouTube and also Cos.tv. This interview, however, will not be pay-per-view at all. It will be 100% free on YouTube and Cos.tv, though I do request that listeners please listen to on Cos.tv instead of YouTube. It's a miracle I haven't gotten kicked off YouTube yet with all the stuff I try to expose. I haven't been able to reapply for monetization though through advertisements. However, I would prefer, though, that people listen on Cos.tv. The more people that listen on Cos.tv, the more you can profit, because that's a blockchain channel. The more people that listen to the video, the more you can profit with blockchain cryptocurrency. So only listen, folks, for 15 seconds on YouTube for the sake of giving me a view credit, and then listen on Cos.tv. I'll have the link in the video description. But enough about that. Neale Donald Walsch, I'd like to give you the floor at the beginning here to, well, you said if people don't know who I am, they're listening to the wrong interview, so you don't really have to explain who you are. People can look at your bio on your website, which I will also, without a doubt, put in the video description when I upload this. But I'm more interested from a primary source perspective, what you experienced that causes you to do the stuff that you do, to be the conversation with God individual that seems to be the conversations with God. It's what you're all about. And what is God? We'll get into what God is and what God is, and I have my own perspective on that, and you can give your own perspective too. But what did you experience from a primary source perspective? You've got the floor. And I'll put myself on mute and shut up, by the way. I don't interrupt my guests. I don't have Alex Jones-itis, so I won't interrupt you. So go right ahead.
Well, Andrew, I was moving through a tough period in my life. This is now 35 years ago. And that lasted around 10 years, and nothing was going right. I had lost my primary relationship. I actually lost my job. I had even lost my health. All three of the mainstays of a person's life were falling apart at the same time, which usually it was in my life. It was usually, one or the other. Maybe the relationship was a little on rocky ground, but at least the career was going well and I was healthy. Or the career was kind of like on rocky ground, but at least the relationship was going well and I was healthy. Or one of the three. But in this case, all three aspects of my life were falling apart at the exact same moment, in the exact same month, actually. And it culminated with an automobile accident in which an older gentleman turned in front of me and crashed into me, and I broke my neck in the car accident. It's an amazing that I didn't die right there on the spot. They told me at the hospital that most people who have a broken neck, and by the way, it wasn't just a hairline fracture. This was a 3/4 inch avulsion fracture of the 7th cervical vertebrae posteriorly. In other words, you could put a pencil through the fracture. That was large enough. That was a major crack in my neck. And somehow or another, it missed, the primary spinal cord injury that causes people to either be paralyzed for life or to die. But by a fraction of an inch, apparently I missed that particular outcome. But I was in therapy, in physical therapy, for the next year and a half, just to figure out how to move my neck from left to right anymore after the fracture healed and fused itself. So this produced an interesting period of time in my life when nothing was going right. And I finally threw my hands up in the air one night at 4:00 in the morning. I couldn't sleep. I woke up. I went out to the couch in my little one-bedroom place that I was able to afford. And I was really crying out, what does it take to make life work? Okay, what have I done to deserve a life of such continuing struggle? I mean, somebody tell me the rules. I'll play. Just give me the rule book. And after you give me the rules, by the way, don't change them, because my experience is that the rules of life themselves were changing, from period of time to period of time, from place to place, from culture to culture. What the hell is the story here? How does it all work? And at that point, I began writing on a yellow legal pad my angry questions to God. I saw happened to be a yellow legal pad on the coffee table in front of me. I guess I was using it to make grocery lists or whatever. So I started writing this angry letter to God with the questions I just talked about. What does it take to make life work? And so forth. And I actually heard a voice over my right shoulder. I turned around. There was no one there. I thought, well, that's great. Now I'm not only angry, but I'm going out of my mind because there's nobody here in the apartment at 2:00 or 4:30 in the morning. But and the voice gently said, Neale, do you really want answers to all of these questions, or are you just venting? And I remember laughing, just like, yeah, if you don't mind. I don't know who the hell, I'm talking with here, but yes, I would like some answers if you got them. And I realized I was really essentially talking to myself. You know how we talk to ourselves. All of us do that at one time or another. But the difference here was that the answers I was receiving to the questions I asked were not answers that I had ever heard of or imagined or received from anyone else before. And that's when I realized, Andrew, that I was not talking to myself, that I had somehow made a connection with some other aspect of life, if you please, that I came to call God. And I came to understand that this aspect of life that we call God resides within all of us, that it is the place of clarity and wisdom that resides within every sentient being in the universe. But the trick is to contact that, to stay in contact with it, and to receive information from it that proves to be of value. I was receiving such interesting answers to my questions, Andrew, that I started writing them down on the yellow legal pad, where I began writing my angry letter to God. I kept track of, the questions I was asking and the answers that I was hearing, if I could put it that way, in my mind, because I didn't want to lose track of what I was experiencing. Never dreamt in a million years that anyone else would ever see a word of this. But in the dialogue itself, if I could put it this way, I was told, you will make of this one day a book, and it will be accessed by many people. And I thought, well, you know what? Interesting. I really am going to keep a record of it, and I'm going to actually send this to a publisher, because I can now measure whether there's anything to this or not. Because this statement, this will one day become a book, was a statement of fact. It was something that I could measure. It was an outcome that I could measure. Everything else that I was receiving was, conceptual in nature, theoretical, could be, could not be. Who would know the difference? But here was a statement of fact. This was a prediction, a specific prediction. You will make of this a book, and it will be accessed by many people. Of course, I know that there wasn't a publisher in the world who was going to publish my handwritten notes claiming to have a conversation with God, which is what I came to call it in my own inner thoughts about it. So I did. I sent my handwritten notes to a publisher, realizing I could just imagine, I'm a man of the world, for heaven's sake. There's not a publisher on the planet who's going to run out to his workroom floor and say to his editors, hold the presses. I got a guy here who's talking to God. And it's not going to happen. But in fact, some publisher opened my envelope, read the handwritten notes, found them to be, I guess, to his mind, interesting enough or fascinating enough. And he said, you know what, we're going to put this out. And they put it out. And not bragging, just saying, it sold over 1 million copies and wound up being translated into 37 languages. And so I had my proof. God said, you know, is that proof enough for you? And then I began to pay a lot of attention to everything else that was being said to me, if you please, in this dialogue. And that became my conversations with God, which extended into a series of books, 9 books in all, over a period of many years, something like 17 or 18 years of receiving these kinds of dialogues, receiving these kinds of messages, if you will, in the dialogues. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Fascinatingly enough, now they're estimating between 12 and 15 million people have read these 9 books in various languages, 37, as I said, 37 languages in all. And gosh, I've found myself in a very interesting position where people somehow feel that I have all the answers or many answers to life's biggest questions. And my job has been to tell people, no, it's not about me. It's about the process that is engageable, to coin a word, that can be engaged by all people everywhere. The main message of Conversations with God is that God talks to everyone all the time. The question isn't, who does God talk to? The question is, who's listening?
Yeah, it's it's interesting the way you say it. The question is who's listening, and well, I mean, someone like I got a lot of things on my mind, and when you got a lot of things on your mind and trying to make sense of a lot of things, people perceive you as not listening. When no, I am listening. But I'm thinking too much when I'm attempting to listen. So that kind of makes things a little hard. So I guess I might as well ask you, can you maybe give someone like Guy who tries to think too much to make sense of the nature of reality, can you give any advice on how to control my thinking too much so I can actually listen a little more clearly and not piss people off and think I'm not trying to pay attention to them?
Well, if you have found a way to think and continue to pay attention at the same time, which I thought I heard you just say, that people think that you're not paying attention, but in fact you are. If that's the truth, then you have a non-problem. Go ahead and do what you're doing.
Okay, that's really good advice then. So I guess moving on, the number one question of all, that as someone who talks about having conversations with God and such, well, what is God? Well, to all the atheists and agnostics out there who assert I call shenanigans on your God, your creator, I don't believe in it. Well, I'm going to say you actually have no proof but to believe that God exists, because God is infinite consciousness, and it can be proven through science and math that there is such a thing as infinite consciousness. There is a shirt that I always wear now whenever I do radio shows. I always used to wear turquoise and blue when I'm doing shows because that's throat chakra that's helping to speak. And I wear a turquoise shirt that has the Mandelbrot set on it. And I say that the Mandelbrot set is without a doubt the best mathematical representation for how everything is boundless but finite, infinite but finite, and everything has infinity to it. No matter how far you go into the Mandelbrot set, you will, no matter how small you get, there is always going to go into infinity. And more importantly, no matter how small the Mandelbrot set representation is within the greater Mandelbrot set, you touch or affect in some way one small part of the Mandelbrot set, it will affect the whole entire Mandelbrot set, even at the smallest level. I had a conversation with some guy who said that outer space is so spacious that the idea that solar system many, 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 many light years from us can have any effect on us is ridiculous. Well, no, the Mandelbrot set proves otherwise. You blink your eyes, you affect the winds on the planet Neptune. To use an analogy, it is extremely minute. For all intents and purposes, it doesn't exist. But the mathematics behind the Mandelbrot set shows that, well, that's the way reality works. And another thing that shows that God is infinite consciousness is the implications behind the double slit experiment. I don't think I really need to get too much into what double slit experiment is about. Well, I'd like to, because there is some debate on that. Nassim Harriman has a thing or two to say about how what is actually going on with that. But do you, I guess, for lack of a better question, agree or disagree with my assertion that you have no choice but to believe in God because God is infinite consciousness, and the mathematics behind the Mandelbrot set and the implications of the double slit experiment prove that?
Well, you have a choice, but you are faced with the choice to believe what some consider to believe the unbelievable, or to not. So, of course, I would not agree with the wording that you use, that you have no choice. But I know you meant it, as metaphorically, not literally. Of course, based on the facts, it would be difficult to deny the existence of some kind of higher power. And by the way, my friend, it turns out that 8 out of 10 people, actually 8.5 out of 10, to use numerical values, agree with you. All the statistics, all these surveys that have been taken in the past 15 or 20 years, in every culture of the planet, they've asked the question, do you believe in some sort of controlling power, some sort of higher power? And 8.5 out of 10 people say yes. We can't seem to agree on what it wants, what it is, how it works, and what happens if it doesn't get what it wants. But 8 out of 10 people do agree that there is some sort of controlling power, some sort of essential essence in the universe that some of us call God, Allah, Brahman, Yahweh, Jehovah, whatever word it pleases us to refer to that ineffable essence that I call the divine. So, yeah, looking at the evidence, it would be difficult to deny, but sometimes it takes more than evidence to cause us to believe something. If we don't think that's true, just look at how public opinion is formed around questions like who won the last election.
Yeah, and you say like you have a choice, so it's wrong to say you have no choice. Well, someone who watches the get that subject matter of the election, anybody who watches Mike Lindell, the pillow guy, his documentary Absolute Interference, which I just spent the last 2 hours a few days ago watching to understand the evidence. How can you not say after watching that if you don't acknowledge that you have no choice but to believe that the evidence shows that the election was a fraud, and if you...
Interestingly enough, 26 judges disagreed, and I understand that all of those judges in every one of those cases is corrupt. There's no question about that. Every single judge has been corrupted. And so the fact that it's gone before people who are supposed to be impartial in case after case after case after case. But I understand that every one of those judges is, a liar, a cheat, a fraud, and have no integrity whatsoever. So I understand that we can't trust the judicial system in this country, not even in one case, not even one out of those 20 judges had any integrity at all. Or is it possible, just possible? I only asked the question, is it possible that maybe the judges felt there was insufficient evidence to bring the case to trial or to cause the case to show that there was a fraud committed in the election? Is it possible that at least one of those judges, and we're not talking about 2 or 3 cases, it was placed before 20 judges in 20 jurisdictions, and every one of them said, nothing to this. You don't have a case. When you got a case, come before us again. So I get it. I understand that all the judges were corrupt. And I'm sure their families were too. They go home and their wives, their children. I mean, they're horrible people. No question about it. In every single case. No doubt about it.
Right. We're getting off on a little tangent here. So let's get back to the whole understanding of God and whether or not you are going to agree or disagree with my claim that God is infinite consciousness. A couple of things about that. I already went into the Mandelbrot set. Also, now I want to get into the double slit experiment. Nassim Harriman has said that our interpretation of what's going on in the double slit experiment is kind of mistaken. Most people say that the act of observing the particle has a role in whether the particle will act as a wave or a particle. What Nassim Harriman asserts is that that's actually not what's going on. What's actually going on is the energy field of you is, regardless of whether or not you are observing, it's not the observation, but your energy field is interacting with the particle, which is causing it to act as either a wave or a particle. Some might say, well, it's the same difference, regardless of whether or not you want to say you're observing or your energy field is interacting with the particle, or is there a difference? Do you think maybe his way of understanding it is a more proper way of seeing it?
Most physicists will agree that nothing that is observed is unaffected by the observer. So, fundamentally, all that you've said so far on this topic appears in my world, is, from what I know to this point, to be absolutely correct. By the way, speaking of things being correct, just to make one final point that I know that no one wants to talk about, who's on the other side of the issue, but you'll forgive me for noticing, even the Supreme Court, loaded with judges that were appointed by the men whose allies were bringing the cases, even the Supreme Court said there's nothing here to justify overturning anything. Now, wow. So even the Supreme Court judges who were appointed by the man turned out to be corrupt. Or is it possible that all the judges, including the Supreme Court, have it right? I asked the question, and I don't think you're going to answer.
Yes. Well, like I said, that subject kind of gets on with a tangent.
As I said, you're not going to answer because nobody on the other side of the question wants to answer that question.
Fair enough. But on a related note to the act of observing the Schrodinger's cat phenomenon, I had Andrew Basiago, the guy who alleges to have traveled through time and gone to Mars too, and he says he rejects Schrodinger's cat in the sense that, put it this way, if a tree falls in the woods, if nobody's there to hear it, does it really fall in the woods? Well, he would say yes. It has nothing to do with whether or not you're observing it. And in the case specifically with Schrodinger's cat, whether or not the cat is alive or dead has nothing to do with whether or not you are observing it. The universe, he says, exists as the way it does, and you can only interact with it to some degree. Now, some people would say, well, the fact that you can create your own reality in certain ways means that that maybe there is a Schrodinger's cat phenomenon going on here. I mean, let me give you one example. Greg Prescott of In5D, and let's all wish him the best of luck with his surgery that he's had. He's often done a little experiment where he's going to go to the Siesta Key beach, and he envisions that there's a parking spot available for him to park in. And if he does that, then he is he finds that he has created a reality in which a parking spot is available for him to park in. But someone like Andrew Basiago, who rejects Schrodinger's cat, may say that it had nothing to do with him envisioning the parking spot being open. The universe already would have known that he would have thought that at the beginning of whether or not he was going to come to the Siesta Key and whether or not he was going to envision the parking spot being open. So the universe, I guess, through its own consciousness, decided to play along with what it knew that Greg Prescott was going to try to do. So it automatically gave him a parking spot open, and that makes it seem like he created it, but he didn't, because the universe exists as it does in a way, and you can't change it. You can only play a part in it.
But isn't that changing it? Isn't playing a part in it changing it?
Yeah, but is it what I'm saying? Did he create the open spot by envisioning pulling into an open spot, or was that open spot going to exist regardless
Yeah,
from the
well, sure.
standpoint?
What came first, the chicken or the egg? How many angels fit on the head of a pin? These kinds of conversations tend to go nowhere because the answer is yes to both questions. The answer is yes, yes. Did he play a part in creating it? Yes. Can he play only a limited part in creating it? Yes. Did the universe decide it ahead of time? Yes. There's no answer to the questions. All the questions are answered yes. Everything that ever happened will happen now and has ever will happen is already happening. There's only one moment. Time is a total illusion. My understanding is there's no such thing as time. So that all things that have ever happened are happening now or ever will happen, are happening in the single moment of now. So the answer to your question or the problem that you pose is yes, he did create it. Yes, the universe was ahead of him and the universe created it. Yes, 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 yes. But the real question is, what does it matter? If the man came down and found a parking space where it was very difficult to find a parking space and no one else could find one, but he did because he imagined ahead of time that he would. And if the universe decided to go along with him, whether he caused the universe to go along with him or whether the universe agreed with him ahead of time or whether it all happened simultaneously, what does it matter? Well, how does it serve to ask these kinds of questions?
And that's a good question. What does it serve to ask? Well, one must ask questions in order to understand the nature of reality. And there's another subject matter. I guess this talks about God in some regard. So I'd like to discuss with you and get your input on it. First of all, before I do, anybody who is a Marvel Comics fan knows how Spider-Man became Spider-Man. Well, he became Spider-Man because a spider that was radioactive bit him. But what made him decide to become a superhero after gaining those powers was because he got pissed off with the human race. He decided he wasn't going to let the human race take advantage of him. So there was one day where he was at an arena and a cop was chasing a thief that stole some money or jewels or something. And the cop asked Spider-Man, could you please help me capture that guy? Help me capture him. But Spider-Man just stood there and let the crook get away. And the police officer was like, what is your problem? With your great powers, you could have stopped that guy in a heartbeat. And Spider-Man was like, yeah, well, that's your job, pal. I just live on these streets. Have a nice day. Well, he didn't have a nice day shortly thereafter because when he got home, he found out his uncle had been murdered. He then overheard the police say that the murderer was at a warehouse. He went to the warehouse, and after cornering the thief and unmasking the mask on the thief, he discovered that it was his fault that his uncle died. Not the thief's fault, but Spider-Man's fault, because the thief that killed his uncle was the same guy that he let go at the arena. So if he had stopped the thief, his uncle would still be alive. And he discovered at that point, with great power comes great responsibility. I'm going to be the superhero now to make up for this and fight crime in the name of my uncle and all the rest of it. Well, why do I bring this up? Well, I bring this up because it has been brought to my attention that humanity could not be a slave to the system of domination and control if we had a lot of technology released that could allow us to quit our 9-to-5 jobs and just get everything provided for us, and we'd be able to live on the country on the planet in harmony, and everything would be provided for us, and all of our medical problems would be healed in a heartbeat and all that if we had like the med beds revealed. And well, it was brought to my attention that some of the white hats did want to release the med beds, but they didn't, because the powers that be said, we're going to blow up DC in a heartbeat if you release the holographic med beds. Is that understood? And on a related note, Edward Snowden, he actually has documents that would show that the 9/11 truth movement was right all along. But he was threatened not to release them. The powers that be said, if you release this stuff, we are going to murder lots of innocent people. Is that understood? My problem and biggest issue with this is the fact that there are, I guess you can call them gods in a sense, or higher dimensional consciousness entities, our space brothers, if you will, watching over us, who do have the ability to, according to ET context, shut down the powers that be in a heartbeat. So I asked the question, why can't we, someone who wants to expose the holographic med beds to the world, or Edward Snowden, he wants to expose the 9/11 documents that he has, why can't he say to those higher dimensional consciousness benevolent entities, excuse me, I just got threatened by the powers that be who said they're going to murder lots of people if I expose the truth. If it's not too much trouble, could you shut down the powers that be so I can expose this stuff and not have to worry about innocent people dying if I expose it? Well, unfortunately, they wouldn't do that. In my interview with Ted Marr, he said that there seem to be certain laws of the universe that say that if we were to ask our space brothers for help in that regard, they would not be able to help us. They would have no choice but to just stand there, just like Spider-Man did, and let the evil criminals and powers that be murder lots of innocent people because they want to make good on their threat. You release this stuff, we're killing people. And that really does kind of piss me off in a sense, and kind of makes me say to our space brothers, some space brothers you have great power, you have great responsibility to help humanity in its awakening, and you're going to let people die, and when you could speed up the awakening of and end the enslavement of humanity in a heartbeat. So why does it have to be this way? Do you have any idea, as someone who has conversations with God, what exactly is the law of the universe that says that they cannot intervene and must let people die if we ask for help in that regard?
I don't pretend to have answers to those kinds of theoretical questions, but if I had to hypothesize, and as long as it's clear to our listeners that I'm not saying that this is the information I received from God, but I do have an hypothesis about it. And my hypothesis is that the so-called space beings, and by the way, I agree with you that there probably are highly evolved beings living both elsewhere in the universe, off this planet, and even for that matter in other dimensions. But I think that that Gene Roddenberry had his finger on something. I think that he was trying to articulate that in the writing of his scripts for the Star Wars films and the whole Star Wars story, or Star Trek, I should say, the whole Star Trek trilogy and the whole Star Trek cosmology. And that is that the law of the universe is that one civilization does not interfere with the evolutionary process of another civilization, even though they obviously could. If they truly have higher powers, they could just step in and stop everything that's bad that's going on, and have only good stuff go on, and have no more misery, no more suffering, no more pain, no more corruption, no more evil, no more dark side to anything, and have it all be sunshine and roses every hour of every day in every place on the planet. And one presumes that higher powers, or if you please, God or the gods, could create that outcome. So the mind begs to know. You're absolutely right. By the way, that's the first question I asked in the book I just published a few months ago. I opened with the very same question you're posing. The book opens with the following question. If there really is a God, if there really is some sort of higher power, what's the use of having it when the world is in such a mess? And forgive me for noticing, has been in such a mess for thousands of years. What the hell's the point of having a God or any kind of higher power if the world is going to be in such a mess? And the book proceeds to seek to answer that question, that it is not God's job, nor is it the job, if you please, of highly evolved beings elsewhere in the universe to fix everything on Earth. But there is a process in place, which you just took great pains to describe in the first 7 minutes of this conversation. You described a process. You described an essence. You described a way in which the universe works, that energetics create outcomes, and that all essential essences, and especially all sentient beings, that is, beings that have self-awareness, have the ability to access that power, that ability to inject energetics into the larger energetic of any moment and affect that energetic, as you would pour hot water into cold water and create a third kind of water, tepid water, neither hot nor cold. And so we notice that there is a process in the universe that's in place. And as civilizations grow in their awareness, and by the way, part of what you said is what creates that awareness. You spent 7 minutes talking about just what we're looking at right now. And so you are part of the process that's creating an awareness on the part of thousands, conceivably hundreds of thousands of people who are listening to you and saying, wait a minute, this guy's got something here. Did you hear what he just said in the past 6 or 8 minutes? He just described the whole process by how energy affects energy through the process of energy projected itself. And as civilizations begin to learn how to use that process, how to use that energetic transfer intentionally and purposefully, they tend to do so, and they tend to evolve as a civilization. But it takes more than one person like you, on the radio sending out a message. It takes more than one person like Snowden saying, I got the papers here, why can't I release them? It takes an agreement by the largest number of people. And by the way, it doesn't have to be, I want to say critical mass. Critical mass is not one more than half. It's not even 30%. It's not even 25%. It's not even 5%. Physicists tell us that critical mass is achieved between 3.5 and 5% of the whole. So if between 3.5 and 5% of the whole can be convinced that Edward Snowden should have the ability to release those papers without the whole human race or thousands of people, if you please, being threatened, when 3.5% of the people agree, and if you continue to do the work that you're doing on the radio that you're now doing, you and others like you can create that outcome. If that occurs, then we won't need the help of beings from outer space or gods from somewhere else in the universe. They're looking at us. We're saying to God, why don't you help us? If you're highly evolved beings, why don't you help us? Why don't you do something to change? Why don't you do something to change life on this planet? And they're saying to us, we're asking you the same question. Why don't you do something to change life on your planet? And I said to God, no, you don't understand. I'm asking you. And God said to me, no, you don't understand. I'm asking you. But you're the one with the power, we're saying to the higher power. And the higher powers are saying, no, you're the one with the power. You're simply not using it. But as you begin to learn to use it, you will experience the process that we call evolution. And we are not allowed to interfere with that process. It'd be like going to a third grader and teaching him calculus and higher math. Not a good idea. He wouldn't understand half of it. He wouldn't get half of it. He wouldn't know how to use it. And if he did learn some of it, he would probably misuse it, as all 3-year-olds are doing right now on the planet where you're all acting like 3-year-olds. So we don't even dare give you the power that we have and the knowledge and the understanding that we possess, because at your current level of evolution, you would probably misuse it and do worse than you're doing now. You might even destroy the entire civilization. So how about if we go through a process called evolution, where we notice that you have the power and we place among you certain voices that have the clarity and have the courage to step up and say how that power can be used. And that's what I heard you do in the first 7 minutes of the program.
Did I really take 7 minutes? If I did, I think I need to cut back on it, because the Cosmic Records reader Andrew Barnes has told me in my last session with him, you need to cut back on your soliloquies, because it may sound interesting and all, and like very informative, but people do have lousy attention spans and they're going to tune out. So
don't you dare cut back on your soliloquies. It's in your soliloquies where the wisdom is released. For God's sake, why do you suppose people listen to you?
Well,
if you cut back on your soliloquies, you're disengaging from the very process that you have engaged to begin with. You're one of the courageous ones, someone who's chosen to make a life rather than a living.
Well, look at it another way. I've been doing this show on at least a weekly basis since November 2013, and yet my YouTube channel only has about 6,500 subscribers. One would be like, dude, you should have a lot more with the stuff you expose. Well, okay, there's a problem, though, and the problem is all my shows, up until now anyway, until recently, have been 2 hours long, and because humans have lousy attention spans, that unfortunately has been a problem regarding the getting the audience up. So you're telling me don't cut back on your soliloquies. Well, I hate to say this, I've cut back on the time I've decided to do these shows. I even told you at the beginning, let's only go for an hour today, and that's probably going to be the way it is, no more than 80 minutes at most with my interviews now. But how do I expect to generate a big audience at a fast rate if the human race having a lousy attention span factor is going to play a big role in that, or has a big role?
I don't think it's about generating a big audience. It's about generating a particular kind of audience. 10 people of power can do more than 100 people who are impotent. So I'm not quite sure that it's about, having the ratings or generating a huge audience. It's about putting into the universe sufficient information in sufficiently clear ways that you create ahas, you create moments of clarity in people who say, wait a minute, wow, wait a minute, this guy is saying something really important here. And whether it shows in your ratings may become irrelevant. Somebody asked me, a few weeks ago in another interview, how did your last book do? Your last book, how many copies did you sell? I said, you know what? I don't even keep track. I never have from the first book. I never have kept track. I'm not concerned with how many books are sold. If one person in a place of power and place of influence, if one COI, as they use the acronym in the military, one center of influence, reads one book I've written and says, whoa, wait a minute, this changes everything in my thinking. So then I've done what I came here to do, or what I intended to do, or what I seek or hope to do. And I think the same is true for you. So make sure you have your eyes on the target, your eyes on the prize. I don't disagree that you should probably cut down. I mean, a 2-hour program might be more than people are willing to listen to, but within the framework that you've designed, I would let yourself say what you've come to say and speak what you are inspired to speak, because you're speaking with clarity about stuff that people hardly ever even think about. And you're opening minds. And if you open just 1 or 2 minds, you could make some changes. You could cause changes to happen in the world that would never have happened. And when ultimately things get rolling and the snowball starts rolling downhill, and people say, where did you ever even have that thought? I promise you, someone's going to turn around and say, I heard this guy on the radio. I was driving down the road one day and I had my computer, I had my telephone on or whatever. And I heard this guy on the internet talking about, and it changed everything for me. It's like somebody just knocked at the door and I opened the door into a whole new understanding. So whether you took 7, I was speaking, whether it was 7.5 minutes or 3.5 minutes isn't the point. The point I was making is that while you were speaking, you were saying the kinds of things that very few people have ever even thought about. And you were putting seeds, you were seeding the marketplace of ideas. And that's what you do. You seed the marketplace of ideas. How many trees grow in the grove is not your concern. How many seeds are planted? That's your concern.
Well, on that note, when it comes to doing what you can do to generate an audience, do you want to be service to self to generate audience for yourself? Or let's say hypothetically, there's something someone else did that you think is the greatest thing any human being could have done. Is it in your best interest to sacrifice spreading the word about your work for that someone else? I've actually got that problem myself. Dave Champion, who wrote the book Income Tax Shattering the Myths, exposing how the income tax that from an United States of America standpoint, complete and total fraud. The laws don't apply to who we're led to believe it does and whatnot. And I have said that if I had a choice between spreading the word about any radio show interview that I've ever done and Dave Champion's book, I would think that it's more in my best interest, for the sake of waking up humanity and helping humanity, to spread the word about Dave Champion's book. And I say that, if planet Earth, and I've heard some people say planet Earth is a planet where entities learn how to become service to others' entities, why should I waste my time spreading the word about my work and being service to self when I think I could be of a much more benefit and serve a much greater life purpose being service to others. And I'm more tempted to want to spread the word about Dave Champion's book, because it seems like people that are like remote viewing the future are talking about like the IRS being shut down in the very near future. And I kind of feel tempted to want to make that happen sooner rather than later by getting Dave Champion's book out there. But of course, you have to receive in order to be able to give, and you got to take care of yourself in order to be able to take care of others, many would assert. So, for lack of a better question, how does one draw the line between deciding when is it okay to start focusing on yourself instead of being so obsessive about focusing on being service to others?
Service to others is service to self, and all masters understand that. So when you spend your life serving others, ultimately what goes around comes around. I hate to be so predictable with that, but it's true. Service to others is service to self. I did ask God a form of that same question, my friend. I said to God in my own words, what does it take to make life work? I don't understand. What does it take to make life work? And the answer that I got was, Neale, it's really very simple. You think that your life is about you, and your life has nothing to do with you. Your life is about everyone whose life you touch and the way in which you touch it. But what you will discover is that when you live your life according to that new golden rule, that your life is about everyone else whose life you touch and the way in which you touch it, everything that you were reaching for, searching for, seeking, yearning for, stretching for, comes to you automatically, falls in on you almost without effort. All the power, all the popularity, all the income, all the stability, all the influence in the marketplace of ideas that you could ever have asked for will fall in on you automatically, because you have generated an awareness in the universal intelligence that you're not here serving yourself in the smallest sense. You're not here serving little self. You're here serving big self, because guess what? There's only one of us. All things are one thing. There's only one thing, and all things are part of the one thing there is. And when you serve the one of us, you obviously will be served in the smallest sense of who you are in your little self, because you are part of the one of us. Or to put all of that into one simple sentence that some guy said around 2,000 years ago, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added unto you.
All right, and that's another raises somewhat on a related note, another question of to what extent is there the truth of the claim you're only as strong as your weakest link? I'm sure there are many exceptions in life that one can think of where you can have a weak link and still be able to form to near possible capacity because the weak link is so insignificant. But when it comes to trying to like shut down the system of domination and control in order to speed up the awakening of humanity, one individual that I've been extremely critical of in that regard is David Icke, the great orator of our time, as George Kavassilis has said. I mean, it's interesting how David Icke, I saw his Wembley presentation live at Wembley in October, it was October 2012. He did say that he expects the vibrational frequency of the Earth after the 2012 Mayan calendar end date to keep increasing and increasing and increasing and increasing at a faster rate. But he doesn't really act like he believes that, because he continues to always try to talk about negative stuff. David Icke would probably speak in his defense by saying, well, I'm only trying to expose every last weak link because, well, we're only as strong as our weakest link. And as long as there are weak links in the chain, I gotta expose them. Well, still, you're kind of going about it the wrong way, I say, because if humanity is going to keep rising at a faster rate towards its awakening, then you don't have to keep talking about negative stuff as much as you do. But he still continues to do it. So in regards to waking up humanity by talking about the negative things to try to expose it and find a solution to it, when you know that at some point it's got to end and all, and we're going to get undergo ascension, when is it going too obsessive and too far to think that you got to always focus on the negative to expose every last weak link?
It's a very good question, and I don't think that the awakening of humanity is even the most desired activity. See, I don't get that we are here, any one of us, David Icke or you or me or anybody else, to awaken humanity. It's not our function. It's not our job. It's not even our hope or our desire, or at least it shouldn't be if we're focused in the right way. It occurs to me that the agenda of the soul, and I believe that we all have a soul. I believe we are three-part beings made up of body, mind, and soul. And I think that we are essentially spiritual beings. I'm not my body. My body is simply something I have. I'm not my mind. My mind is a tool that I have, fair enough. But I really am a spiritual entity. And I have an agenda. And the agenda is the evolution of my soul to become a greater and greater version of the highest vision I ever held about who I am. Or to put it in simple terms, to demonstrate divinity, to demonstrate my true identity. Now, when I focus on that and that alone, that is, when the intention of every human being is not to wake up the world or wake up humanity or expose all the wrongdoing or any of that, but in fact, to demonstrate their true identity at the highest level, all the rest happens automatically. The challenges, the wrongdoings, the bad stuff that's going on, all the negativity, so to speak, is exposed automatically without that person intending to do so specifically as their primary outcome or their primary desired outcome. So when you look at all the people on this planet, all the human beings on this planet who have made huge differences in the world, not only exposing the challenges and the bad stuff that's going on, but changing people's consciousness and raising the collective consciousness of humanity. When you think about the people who have done that, they're not people who set out to change the world at all. They didn't set out to change the world. They set out to change themselves. They set out, I hate to say it, but Gandhi put it perfectly, be the change you wish to see. And these are people who decided to become focused on their own evolutionary development. And now we look back on them, we call them gurus and teachers and masters, and even, we call them, in some cases, the savior, because they've saved us from our worst thoughts about ourselves. But they were people who were primarily focused on their own individual expression. And when people were astonished at how they had become so wise, so powerful, so blessed, so wonderful, so superlative in every way, when people were surprised at the way they were as human beings, they would look at those same people and say, why are you so amazed? These things and more shall you do also. So what I notice is it's not about you or Ike or anybody else setting out to change the world, to expose the world's evils, to wake everybody up. My function isn't to wake up humanity. I haven't been trying to do that ever. My function is to wake up Neale and to cause Neale to think and to speak and to act in all the moments that I can possibly muster the ability to do so, to act in a way that demonstrates, that announces, that declares who I really am. Now, what I've noticed is that to the degree that I do that, everything else that I thought I was trying to do or that other people think I should be doing happens automatically. There's no way in the world I could have planned for 15 million people to read my books. If that was my objective, I probably would not have achieved it. But my objective was not that. I sat down and I had my conversations with God out of a deep desire. I said to God, to my understanding of God, help me, Neale, get rid of any evil, any aspect of me that is less than what I could be. Let me use this lifetime. In this lifetime, could I just get to a place where, when I die, they put on my gravestone, he really did his best to be his best. He really did his best to be his best. Did he achieve it 100% at 100% of the time? No. Did he do his best to be his best? Yes. And his effort to be his best and to do his best to be his best happened to touch other people's lives in such a way that they got it. And suddenly, the evil, the difficulties, the challenges, in some ways and in many ways, dissolved and disappeared. So we need more people who are focused on their own individual evolution and not worried about going out there to change the world. Because the first will achieve the second, in my observation.
Okay, time for one more question, and then
I could be wrong about all of that, of course. It's just my own understanding.
Fair enough. Time for one more question, and then plug your site, and then we'll call it a show. But you said, or you mentioned earlier the phrase mind, body, and soul, and then you said it's a spiritual life. Well, some say mind, body, and spirit instead of soul. George Kavaslis, I mentioned him earlier. He tries to give a description of what the best way to think of the difference between soul and spirit is. He said soul. Everything comes from soul. Consciousness and spirit come from soul. He said the best way he sees to look at it is there is soul, your eternal essence, there is the soul, and then out of that comes consciousness, which is best defined as the awareness of being aware, and spirit. What is spirit? Spirit to him is basic, and you could imagine it as a play on the word spear and it, like you're throwing a spear at it, like a spear representing individual small aspects of your soul, and the it that the spear is going to is a time and place within the acknowledged illusion of space and time. Your spirit is your soul manifest within the acknowledged illusion of space and time. Do you agree or disagree with George Kavaslis's description there?
I love it. I'm not sure that I agree entirely with it to the letter in the sense that I hold the same thoughts, but I don't disagree with it. There's not a part of what you just said that I can say I disagree with that. My own understanding has been just slightly different. I've been asked the same question as well, by the way, many times in many lectures, and I've been lecturing all over the world for the past 25 years. You know, everywhere on the planet, practically all the major cities, I've been at least once lecturing, and I get asked that question a lot. What's the difference between spirit and soul, the way you use the word? The way I use the word is spirit in my vernacular, in my vocabulary, in my usage of the word, is the essential essence, the undifferentiated essence of what I call divinity, the primary source. I use the word spirit to talk. It's kind of like the stem cell of the universe. You know, the stem cell of the body is the cell in the body that has not yet differentiated in any particular way. It is the pure, undifferentiated, essential essence of life itself that I call divinity expressed. So that, to me, is spirit. And the spirit differentiates and individualizes in what I call the souls of every sentient being in the cosmos. So I think that every sentient being has a soul, and I think that the soul is the individuation of what religion calls the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit being the sum total of all the essences that have individualized. The Spirit being the stem cell of the universe that is not yet differentiated. But in this case, it is differentiated as Neale, and I call that differentiation my soul. But again, you know, frankly, I think it gets to be an academic question. Is, you know, the delicious and really exciting definition that you offered from this other source was just as exciting to me as the thought that I just expressed to you. So I think it gets to be an academic question. How many angels fit on the head of a pin? Well, are we talking about a stick pin, a clothespin? Are we talking about a safety pin? And we're talking archangels or regular angels or guardian angels? So it gets to be an academic question. And I'm not terribly interested in academic questions other than, you know, beyond the point that they could be intellectually interesting. Okay, fair enough. It's interesting to talk about these things, but what does it matter in day-to-day life? How many angels fit on the head of a pin? Or what is the difference between spirit and soul? What really matters is, what are you, my friend, thinking and saying and doing today that demonstrates the best thought you ever had about the best version of who you are. And when you pay attention to that and touch other people's lives in that particular way, there's no way that you can lose, if you want to call this the game of life. And when you die, people will say, wow, one of a kind.
Yes, and you are one of a kind. I'm one of a kind. We're all special in our unique one of a kind way. So with that being said, I guess we might as well bring this interview to a close. Why don't you plug your site, anything else you want to give out? And you say you don't want to really make a sales pitch out of it, but if you can't resist, by all means, you're more than welcome to plug your books and all that and everything else. So why don't you close us out here, and I will make sure that I upload this to YouTube after I get my other guest interview. I still owe her that, but it won't be for more than a week before I get this uploaded to YouTube. I promise you that. So let's close this out.
Yeah, well, really, I have nothing to sell to anybody. If a person wants more information or they'd like to ask me and interact with me, ask me any question or interact with me, they can do it easily enough. It's really quite simple. My website is CWG-Connect.com. CWG, of course, stands for Conversations with God. So people who want to stay connected with the energy that they're receiving here from me can do so quite easily. Just go to CWGConnect.com. And there they can find all sorts of resources, and as well as a place called Ask Neale, where they can jump onto Ask Neale and ask me any question they want. Or they can go to my Facebook page. I have about 900,000 followers, and people are jumping on that page every day asking me questions, the same kinds of questions that you're asking. And that's what I would offer people. But I would leave them with this one word of advice: be your own authority in all matters, spiritual, philosophical, and political. Be your own authority. Or as Bill said, to thine own self be true, and it follows as the night the day. Thou then canst not be false to any man. But he also said something else that we must all remember. That's why I love Bill's writing. He's a hell of a writer. Remember what Bill said. There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy.
Yes, that is the case. And don't even get me started on whether or not the William Shakespeare did or didn't exist. That's another can of worms. But maybe that's another show we'll save for some other time. So thank you. Thank you very much, Neale Donald Walsch. Pleasure having you on. And I will get this uploaded by the end of the week. Bless you. God bless you on your connections with God and everything. Namaste. And good luck.
Thank you, my friend, and the same to you. Bye for now.